today it is time for one of my most requested videos ever. Yes, today we're checking out Vulcan. Now, Vulcan is an anti-cheat plugin for Minecraft, which essentially means that Vulcan will attempt to keep people from cheating on your server and send a notification to the mod team of the server every single time it detects something suspicious. Now, from all the different anti-cheats I've tried in these last couple of years, Vulcan did for sure come out on top, which is why today I'm gonna tell you what the plugin does, how it works, and how you can customize it so it fits your needs. I do want to ask you to double check if you're subscribed to my channel, as such a big part of my daily viewers is still not. And also, if you're not yet in my Discord server, the Cassasura Universe, do make sure to join. Link can be found down below. Now, let's start out with the first question. Why Vulcan? There are so many different anti-cheat plugins out there on the market nowadays. How do you even know which ones are great and which ones are not? Well, the only answer to that is I've just tried a lot of them. And most anti-cheats have the same issue. They either require a lot of customization and configuration before they kind of work the way you would expect, or they just cause a crazy lot of lag. A great example of this is the Spartan anti-cheat. It is an anti-cheat I purchased for one of my Suracraft servers when those were still around, and we noticed that for some reason the server just kept on crashing. Sometimes it would just boot off, and it turned out every single time the server was out of resources. Now, after doing some research, we discovered that Spartan anti-cheat was the one causing these resource issues. Because you see, every single anti-cheat has to track all the movements of all of your players 24/7. Just think about it. Every single time somebody walks on your server, every single time somebody jumps on your server, every single time something moves inside of your inventory, there is a chance that somebody is using a cheat. So the anti-cheat needs to keep track of all of these movements for all players at all time. And most anti-cheats don't do this efficiently. Now, I'm not straight up saying that Spartan is bad. I'm just saying that for me, from my own experience, it didn't work well. The only actual great anti-cheat that I can easily recommend to people, and that works pretty well straight out of the box, is Vulcan. And that's why I decided to make a video about that one today. Now, Vulcan can easily be purchased from Spigot MC. Link to their page can be found in the description down below. Do make sure you're logged into a Spigot MC account, otherwise you're not gonna be able to see the page. Then make sure to drag Vulcan into your plugins folder and reboot your Minecraft server. And after doing that, you're basically ready to go. Now, like I mentioned earlier, Vulcan works pretty well straight out of the box. You are not required to go through every single setting and change literally the entire plugin before it works somewhat well. With that being said, there might be some settings that you want to change, but also that is a big maybe. Because unlike with other plugins, for anti-cheats there is no one config fits all. Every single server that has the Vulcan anti-cheat might have their configuration completely different. And it all depends on a lot of different factors. For example, what type of plugins are you using? How much RAM, CPU power, and network speed does your server have? Where are the players who mostly play on your server located? Does your server support Bedrock Edition? Those are all different factors that can make it so you want to configure the plugin differently. But luckily for us, even though the config will be different for everyone, Vulcan is pretty clear about when you have to change something. Now, the place where all the magic happens is inside of the Vulcan config file, which can be found inside of the Vulcan folder, which is located inside of your plugins folder, which is of course located in your Minecraft server directory. Now, the vulcan.config file is not just a simple config. It is a behemoth of a config file that has a total of 4,000 lines. 4,000. Insane. That is one of the longest configs I've ever seen a plugin have. But for a plugin like Vulcan, it makes total sense. Now, don't let this massive config scare you away. Don't you worry at all. Because what I would actually recommend is not changing a crazy ton of stuff here. At least not at first. I'm gonna show you a few tips and tricks that you can use to narrow down which parts of this config might need some extra attention and configuration. But if you would just scroll to a random section here and then you see this, you still have probably no clue what it all means. And it doesn't matter, because a config like this, we have to approach step by step. So the first thing that you can change here in the config is the prefix, of course. Just change it to whatever you like. Then we got the format, the hover message, just all basic information that you can tweak to fit your own branding, essentially. Over here you can change the toggle message. Then you can change if alerts should be printed in the console or not. So as soon as somebody is flagged, essentially, should it appear in the console. Now at line 89, you can also enable the log file. So essentially, as soon as somebody violates the rules, should that information be logged to a file. This is where you can enable that. Now there's also a violation reset counter. So currently it is set to 8 minutes, which means that every 8 minutes, all the violations will be reset. Now then we got a very cool feature that Vulcan comes with, the client brand alerts. Now what does that mean? Well, client brand alerts are alerts that will appear as soon as a player joins your server with a suspicious client. Now, suspicious means anything that is not vanilla. So let's say somebody would join with an installation of Forge or an installation of Fabric, or maybe they use Lunar Client. Then Vulcan will send an alert about that. But like the Vulcan developers already say right here, the client brand feature in Vulcan 2.0 allows you to gain insight on what clients the player may be using. However, the client brand feature cannot tell which client the player is using. It can only say which client the client says it's using. So in case somebody joins with a Forge client, then the client will most likely say, hey, I'm a Forge client, just so you know. But hacked clients, for example, will not say, hey guys, I'm a hacked client. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good day. It will not do that. It will just say like, hey, I'm a vanilla client. Nothing suspicious going on here. Now I'm gonna ruin your server. So while this feature can be useful, blocking some clients to some extent, most hacked clients are very aware that this is a feature, that this is a thing, and they have ways to bypass it. So in conclusion, a client brand of vanilla does not mean the player is using a vanilla client. And the client brand along the lines of Lunar Client may not always be an actual Lunar client. Good to keep in mind. Hacked clients will just be disguising essentially as a regular client. Now the reason why keeping that in mind is so important is because you can also block clients over here. So in case you want to block a Forge client or a Lunar client, you can do that by adding the names here. Once again, to keep in mind, blocking all the clients except for example, vanilla doesn't mean every single player joining won't be using a hacked client. It just reduces the chance, essentially. Now, next up, we got the connection settings. So this is essentially Vulcan kicking players for numerous reasons. For example, desync. A player was kicked because they're out of sync with the server. A player was kicked for not replying to transaction packets. The player was kicked for not replying to keep alive packets. The player was kicked for having a too high ping. Now, you can always disable one of these if one of them does turn out to be an issue for whatever reason. Now, after that, we just have a crazy ton of messages which you can customize. We got ghost block fixes. We got more messages, and the config just goes on like this for a really long time. And once again, I would not recommend changing anything here unless you have a specific reason for it. But otherwise, I wouldn't touch all of this too much. Now then on line 584, we got the Discord webhook. Now the Discord webhook is really cool because it allows Vulcan to send alerts directly to your Discord server. So even if nobody is online and you don't want to check the log file every single time, you can also just make the alerts go to Discord. Now for this, you do need a webhook. There's an entire tutorial here on how to create a webhook. I will also leave a link to this website in the description down below. But essentially here you have a little tutorial, make a webhook, where it just literally tells you step by step how to create one. So open your settings, click on create webhook, then edit your avatar, choose what channel the webhook posts to, just all stuff like that. It is so incredibly easy. And then you just fill in the information that Discord provides you over here, and that's it. After enabling it, the webhook will start posting alerts to your Discord server. It is awesome. And then finally, at line 684, we got the checks. So what is a check? It are things that Vulcan will check for you, will keep track of for you. So these are, for example, checks for combat. And you can see there is a lot of information here. So should it be enabled? Yes. Is it punishable? Yes. What is the Discord alert interval? 1. Should the punishment be broadcasted? No. And then max violations. So how many violations can you have before you get punished? Well, 1 is what it's on right now. You can change that. You can also change the alert interval, the don't alert interval, and then the max ping and the minimum TPS. Now, when scrolling down a bit more, you can see a lot of settings. So we got buffer, hold bar shuffle, and random rotation. And here under buffer, it will say max 3 and then multiple .75 and decay .5. And unless you've set up an anti-cheat plugin before, this will probably all mean nothing to you. Which is why, once again, I think it is overall a bad idea to just randomly change things here. Now, of course, there is an explanation when you scroll up a little bit. So let's say we want to know what max buffer means. We can scroll up, look for buffer, and then here we got max. So buffer is how many times the player needs to fail the check in order to actually alert. This is basically how sensitive the check is. I recommend keeping these as default, but if you want the anti-cheat to be a little more sensitive or less sensitive, you can play with them a little. And if I want to know what hotbar shovel is, in that same way, I'm gonna look for hotbar shovel and a minimum VL to shovel. The minimum violations that a player has to be at in order for this feature to function. So lots of information, quite confusing, especially thinking about that currently we are at line 700 and it goes on until 4000. The rest of this entire config are all checks. These are only checks. So changing this all is just undoable, which is why I'm gonna tell you a handy trick. Now, this is not a trick I came up with myself. We have to give the right props to the right people. Random Chat, one of my moderators, came up with this, and it is actually genius. So what we are going to be looking at is this line over here, punishment command. So essentially, when a player violates this check, then this is the command that will execute. So it will kick a player for the reason Vulcan unfair advantage. Now, unfair advantage doesn't give a lot of information. We still have absolutely no clue what unfair advantage means in this case. So what the best thing is that you can do is change these punishment commands. So for example, currently we are looking at the combat checks. What we can do is copy the word combat and paste that over here. So now when a player gets kicked for failing this check, this is the command that will execute, and they will see that they were kicked for combat. Now you want to make sure that all the players on your server know where to report false positives. So if a lot of players get kicked for this exact reason a lot of times, and you know for sure they are not using a hacked client, then you can easily narrow down where the problem is coming from. So the best thing to do would just be copy this line and paste it to all the combat checks. If you want to go next level, you can even subcategorize them. So this is, for example, combat check A. So let's call this one combat A, and then this one is going to be combat B, and then so on. And if you change all of those kick messages, players, and because of that yourself, will know exactly what they were kicked for. And let's say not a lot of false claims occur, but for some reason, combat check G is giving a lot of false positives. You know, you have to change something here, or maybe disable the whole thing altogether. Now, everything I'm scrolling through right now are all combat checks. That is how many combat checks are out there. But we're scrolling through them until eventually we get to the next section, auto block. So once again, what I and Random Chat would recommend doing is changing this message to auto block, maybe even auto block A. And if you do that everywhere, which I realize does take a lot of time, it can help you narrow down issues very quickly. Now overall, the Vulcan config file is pretty good at holding your hand. For example, here it says auto-clicker checks are really not recommended for banning since you can't ever be 100% certain. In other words, they are warning you to not change this kick command to, for example, a ban command, because that is also something you can do. If you change this to ban, then when a player doesn't pass this check, they will be banned from the server. Now, I would never recommend doing that for any anti-cheat plugin, unless you got a massive moderation team that is answering tickets 24/7, they can easily and quickly unban players after they are falsely banned. Otherwise, don't do this, not recommended. Just keep it on kick, way safer and way easier. Now, after changing all of these punishment commands, it is just time to open up your server. Let players play. Let them have fun. Let them push your server to the limits. And soon enough, you will see which flags occur often and maybe even too often. And you can get into a discussion with your players, or maybe you just set up a report system where players can report false positives. And if a lot of players are reporting the same false positive, then soon enough, you will know that something is wrong with that specific flag. And you can easily go to the config and tweak it and disable it so it no longer occurs. Now, there is of course another thing that you can do, and that is hacking on your own server. So if you're familiar with some hacked clients and you feel comfortable installing them, downloading them and cheating on your own server, you can double check if Vulcan is actually reporting everything it should be reporting. So just try to use speed hacks. Try to use aura kill. Try to use other things you don't want on your server and see if Vulcan actually catches up. If you are able to cheat on your own server and Vulcan is not catching up, you might also want to tweak some settings to make sure it does. By, for example, tweaking the sensitivity, which we took a look at earlier. Now, this is how you kind of have to play with the plugin. Like I said, there's no one config fits all. The best thing to do is changing all of these punishment commands so that you can easily distinguish them, and after that, just run the server. Let your players play and tweak along the way. Now, that is pretty much the whole Vulcan config, where 99% of all things that you have to change with this plugin occur. For the rest, Vulcan also comes with a few in-game commands. You can access them by typing /Vulcan. So we got a lot of commands here. Don't have to use every single one of them, but some could be useful. For example, the reload feature. After you've changed something in the config, you can just reload the plugin and you don't actually have to reboot your entire server. Of course, a reboot is always recommended, but let's say you got 10 or 20 players online and you don't want to disturb them, simply disable the check that is causing issues, reload the plugin, and you're good to go. Now, something else which you can do is disable checks. So this allows you to actually disable a check in game without going to the config. Now, in general, I would recommend just going to the config file, as doing stuff over there, while it might seem more overwhelming, is a lot easier than doing it in game. But if you want to disable checks in game, I would recommend first doing Vulcan checks. So when you execute that command, you can see all the different checks that are currently active. So Elytra B, C, F, G, I, K, L, M, then entity flight, normal flight, fast break, fast climb, fast place. We got a ghost hand, aura kill, and the list goes on. But let's say aura kill A is causing a lot of issues. We can simply do Vulcan disable check and then kill aura A. Just like that. Disabled, check, kill aura A, and now it will no longer cause issues for you. Isn't that great? Now, by default, as soon as you join your server, you will get this notification if you're an OP. Vulcan alerts enabled. Now, if you want to enable or disable Vulcan alerts for certain players, you can simply do Vulcan alerts and after that, a player name. For example, Kasasura, press enter, and there we go. Now they're disabled, now they're enabled, and you can do this for any player. Now, of course, the video wouldn't be complete without a list of commands and permissions. Now, these permissions you can of course add with a plugin like, for example, Lookperms. In case you're not using Lookperms yet, or maybe you have no clue what it is, I've made a full video about it and I will leave it linked as a card in this video. But when you add, for example, the permission Vulcan.alerts to your mod group in Lookperms, then they will be able to toggle on or off Vulcan alerts. Now, Vulcan also has their own little ban feature, which could be really useful. So then you can ban a player through Vulcan. Now, on a public Minecraft server, you might want to do this. Why? Well, if a player is, for example, making a lot of violations, and you as a moderator, you don't want to be blamed for this ban, then you can just ban through Vulcan. And it will just look like Vulcan is the one that banned you. Now, you can also freeze a player. So let's say a player is just constantly using some sort of speed hack. You can just freeze them, making them unable to move. Just to have some fun with them before you actually ban them from the server. And of course, there are also bypasses. So you can let a certain player, for example, an owner or an admin, bypass every single check. Or if a certain player is having a lot of trouble with one check in particular, you could disable that certain check for that certain player. Now, just to give you a little example of this, when a player has a very high ping, in other words, they have a bad connection to your server because maybe your Minecraft server is located in a completely different country than where the player is located, the chance of getting false flags increases. Because sometimes the player will have lag spikes, sometimes the player will just be set back, and Vulcan could see this as you using some sort of speed hack. So let's say you do have a player on your server who you are sure is not using any hacked client, but they are constantly getting targeted by Vulcan. You can make them bypass some of these checks. It could be very useful. Now, another very handy command that Vulcan adds is /Vulcan profile. So when I request a profile for myself, you will get all sorts of information about a particular player. So you can see the player's UUID, you can see what version they are in, which currently it says higher than supported version, and that is because I'm currently playing in Minecraft 1.21, while Vulcan doesn't officially support 1.21 yet. Now, they can see I'm using the Fabric client, which is completely right. I am using Fabric. You can also see the sensitivity, which is 99%, and down here you can see the total violations. So everything is categorized in combat, movement, or player violations, and here you can see how many a particular player has received. Super handy. Then you can also see their nearby blocks and even nearby entities. So when you suspect a certain player doing something a bit illegal, you can double check where they are, what are they close to, what potion effects do they have, just all stuff like that. It is really handy, especially when you're suspicious of a certain player. Definitely make sure to use this command. And that is gonna be everything for today. Have I showed everything the Vulcan plugin has to offer? Absolutely not. But I hope I could at least give you a little bit more insight in what this plugin has to offer, how it all works, and how you can tweak and customize it for yourself. I do want to ask you to double check if you're actually subscribed to my channel, because you would help me out so much by doing that. You actually would. Also, don't forget to join my Discord, the Casasor Universe. Link can be found down below. And thank you so much to my channel members for the incredible support. Thank you so much for keeping my channel going and supporting me along the way. And then I will see you in the next one. Bye bye!